Okay, we'll begin now. This is the first lesson of our Magical Hebrew class. I'm going to talk a little bit, set things up for the whole course, since this is the first introductory lesson. We'll sort of introduce the Hebrew language, and then we'll move on and do a little bit of practice. Speaking about the course in general, it is very loosey-goosey. What I mean by that is it's not like a formal class, and I don't take attendance. You come and go as you please. It's more like lessons, and my goal is to just provide the resource for people. There is an agenda. There is sort of a syllabus, if you will. We'll go over that today. But I want to encourage you, if you're watching this live or you're watching this recorded, to please invite people to participate. There will be an updated link for people who want to drop in after we've done this first class. And the only reason is so that I can be sure to email the past episodes to anyone who does a drop in. As always, these are donation based, right? There's a suggested donation, but please feel free to donate what feels right to you, what's right in your situation. My emphasis is in helping people learn and use Hebrew. That's the goal here, right? And if making that suggested donation is an impediment to you or an obstacle to you, make the donation that's appropriate for you, just so we can support the work and keep it moving. With that little introduction, we'll begin with our preliminary material here. I'm going to talk a little bit first about the course, why I've decided to offer the course, why I'm offering it at this time. And I want to begin with a quote by the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, for folks who don't know, called the Besht, was a miracle worker, a thaumaturge and a theurge in the Jewish ghetto in Poland in the 17th century. Many of my contemporaries in my schooling and their grandparents and their great-grandparents had memories, more their great-grandparents had secondhand memories of the miracles of the Baal Shem Tov, and it's sort of the most recently recognized Hebrew miracle worker. So Baal Shem Tov said, if you only know Aleph, teach Aleph. As we'll see in a little bit here, Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. But that's something that when I heard that quote and was reminded of that quote, it inspired me to do this class. I've thought for a long time about offering this class. I have offered a Hebrew folk magic series in the past, but I have never offered just Hebrew lessons. It's something that's been talked about. It's something that has been asked for. At this point, I have seen this Baal Shem Tov quote and been reminded that although maybe I don't know every nuance and I can't necessarily explain all the obscure historic scripts and all this stuff, I certainly know Aleph, so I should at least teach Aleph. And so we'll at least cover Aleph. I think we'll get a little further than that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this course, why the Aleph Bet, the Hebrew alphabet, is important for occultists and magical practitioners to know and understand as a foundation. Most of our magic in the world right now, as we'll see in a little bit when we go through the history a little more, comes through either the Hebrew alphabet or related alphabetic systems. Those would be languages in the Semitic language group, and specifically the cultures related to those. Again, we'll look into that a little more in a bit. So by and large, if we're looking at any ancient magic at all, we're going to come across this family of alphabets. If we're going to look at any magic that's classical, right, past, once we get into the Christian era and beyond, we're going to see it in Hebrew primarily, because Hebrew is the only one of this language family that was carried over liturgically, meaning in the canon of scripture, into Christianity, into the Christian era. And so these other languages still existed, sort of in the way of hieroglyphics. That is, they were considered dead languages or for scholars only, whereas Hebrew remained, at least within the liturgy, right? At least within the sacred circles, the religious circles, a vital language. It wasn't completely vital, and we'll talk about that in a bit too, because it was somewhat fossilized, but it was a living fossil, if you will. And therefore, because of that link to antiquity, because of that link to this magical language group, which included Chaldean, which included the Berber language. It also includes Ge'ez, the ancient Ethiopic script. It includes many of the language families that, as we'll see, were influential. Phoenician and the Babylonian languages, the languages of Mesopotamia, these languages that were very influential and used by the priestcraft and often carried by the priestcraft of these great vaunted cultures from which we inherited our ideas of astrology and divination and magic and all these things. So because of that, it's just woven into the fabric to a large degree of occultism, of magic. We see it in so many traditions. I used to be shocked. And certainly when I first started, my undergraduate research into African diasporic traditions and different traditions around the world, and I started seeing Hebrew letters, I was utterly surprised, right? I did not expect that. When I started looking at European grimoires, when I started studying Freemasonry and things while I was doing my master's work, again, I would encounter not only Hebrew letters, but Hebrew words written out in English, of course, and Hebrew ideas. And so I found at that point how essential for me it was to be able to fall back on a knowledge of Hebrew, an ability to read Hebrew, and all these things. In some cases, to prevent myself from making errors that had been in something that maybe had been lost in translation. And I can see that if I transcribed it as written, it would not be correct because I could understand things in Hebrew. In other cases, to look back to sources and compare things to the original. And in yet other cases, to provide myself the context that I could not find, say, in a pentacle of Solomon, right? Where there's this is without Hebrew, I would just see it as mysterious characters around the outside, right? But with Hebrew, I can read what's around the pentacle. As we get later in the course, certainly we will. And then say, oh, where are these words from? Look at that verse in scripture, find the psalm that it's extracted from, see the context of it, and work more broadly and richly with everything involved, right? Read the entire psalm, perhaps, as I'm constructing the pentacle, things of that nature. So being able to interact more fully with so much of even the modern Western magical practice is really what opens up when we start accessing Hebrew. So I want to talk a little about how to prepare yourself for this course. And I don't mean spiritually or ritually, but I want you to get a notebook if you can, like an actual real paper notebook, one that has many pages and that are connected. Because as we go, we'll kind of go through the same concepts again and again and again. And it is helpful to be able to, hopefully my camera will cooperate and show, sort of line these things up, right? The different representations of the letters. And, as I've learned and practiced, we'll get into this in a moment as well, the different scripts and the different things of that nature, I have found it helpful to always have my authoritative guide sheet, right? That I can always flip back to and say, I know I wrote it correctly here. As you'll see, many of the letters are constructed in similar ways, so it can be confusing in sometimes. So it's good to have a reference guide to check back to and say, okay, this is my master list. And then behind that, you have pages and pages and pages and pages to practice, right? And you can practice all kinds of, not just the writing, but the ideas. We'll talk about kind of the ideographic usage today, a little bit at the end. So to prepare yourself for the course, I want you to get a notebook. I also want you to get a few very basic art or stationery supplies that are going to come in handy, especially once we start doing the seals. Number one, a ruler. A ruler, ideally one that has numbers on it, not just a straight edge. That said, if we have time, we will do a little bit of explanation on what I call sacred geometry. I don't know, most people use that term meaning something different, I think. But some of the ancient design, ancient masonry stuff, where how we can work with just a straight edge and a compass to make all the shapes. And because as we get into complex amulets, we'll want to lay things out in shapes. We may get into some of that. Maybe we'll do extended lessons on that stuff at another point. But that said, for now, get a ruler with numbers, a compass, a drawing compass. That's a thing you use to make a circle with the pointy end that you probably haven't seen since elementary school. Ideally, get a drawing compass that has like a pretty wide adjustable bit that can hold, because usually it'll come with like a little golf pencil. And I'm going to suggest you find a kind of higher end one that'll let you put even a marker in there, up to a Sharpie or something like that. Because as we construct the amulets, you're going to want to do them in marker at some point. So that's something you're going to want to have. I'm also going to tell you that you're going to want to find, and I'm trying to give you some options here. You're going to want to find a calligraphy pen that you like. I personally very much like these. They are hard to find, but you can definitely find them on Google with a little persistence. And whenever I see them, they pop up on Amazon from time to time as well. The company is Zig, Z-I-G, Memory Systems. It is a Zig calligraphy pen. It has two ends, and that's what makes this one different. It's double-ended, so this end has a 2mm tip, and this end has a 5mm tip. I realize that doesn't make much difference on camera here. There's the 5mm tip, and here's your 2mm tip. You can see it's much thinner. If you don't like the zigs, well, that's all good. It's not required. But a calligraphy marker, excuse me, is what you want, and that is required. You'll see when we form the letters, and we'll look at it when we get to that class, the difference between forming them with just a regular pen and a calligraphy pen. As we start to understand the forms and the connections between the shapes of the letters and start to look a little bit into the Kabbalah behind that, you'll see why we use a calligraphy tip to capture the certain energies. This is particularly important. Magically, if you only have a Sharpie, use a Sharpie. If you only have a pencil, use a pencil. But if you want to go for the super deluxe experience, this is what I recommend. Finally, where to find the course resources. So this link is not live yet. I just updated the DNS maybe 15 minutes ago. Give it a couple hours to spread across the internet. But you guys will be able to go to HebrewStudents.hoodooMoses.com. I have not yet put up any sort of portal or anything, but that's where I'm going to be dumping all the videos, all the resources, all the graphics, the presentations, things of that nature. So you can reference it if you're watching it on recording, or if you find yourself not on a Monday or Wednesday wanting to practice, which hopefully you will. So I encourage you to make use, avail yourself of the resources there. If you're watching this on recording, they should be up. If you're with us live, they'll be up. Usually they say give it 24 hours. So by tomorrow, this time, it should be up. So why this course? Why did I feel it was necessary? As I said before, I felt like it was necessary for me to do another Hebrew course. So I've encountered the idea of magical practitioners, occultists, people of all sorts of different backgrounds for the reasons we've already discussed, who recognize the significance of Hebrew in the magical tradition, right? They want to access it. And so they want to go to learn it. And they find that there's, really three ways they can try to access it. The first is to find an Israeli Hebrew speaker. The second is to find a rabbi. And the third is to find just someone who has learned Hebrew, right? A non-native Hebrew speaker. So all of those really do present some challenges for our purposes. I'll touch on those briefly and kind of therefore get to why I thought this course was important to create as a remedy. First of all, the Israeli Hebrew speaker is your first and foremost. The issue with the Israeli Hebrew speaker is that Israeli Hebrew and ancient Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, are closely related, but are roughly as different as the English I'm speaking now and the Victorian, even earlier than that, really, like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales English, right? Bathed in switch liqueur type stuff, right? That's a little line I know from Canterbury Tales. I can't tell you heads or tails of it, but I know those three lines, which means bathed in sweet liquor, sweet liquid, right? So it doesn't sound anything the same. It is an earlier version of the same language, but it doesn't sound the same. And that is the big difference. Modern Israeli Hebrew is constructed from a European community that emigrated to the newly created state of Israel after World War II. So actually, Israeli Hebrew is spoken with a European accent. It makes a difference in certain words, the sort of R character, resh. Israelis pronounce it in the throat. They say rash. rather than resh up at the front of the mouth. Hopefully that's coming across on the mic. Let me maybe get closer. So the Israeli pronunciation would be like resh, rash, it's in the throat, versus resh in the top of the mouth. Another one is the character het, which Israelis pronounce as chet. It's in the throat, like in German, ch, rather than ha, like in Arabic. So Israeli is a Semitic language, or excuse me, Hebrew is a Semitic language, classical Hebrew, and so it's pronounced more like Arabic. So an Israeli would generally doesn't know this, right? Israelis speak modern Hebrew. There are different words for different things, right? The conventional words for things are not the same. And a lot of this stuff is more esoteric when we talk about the forms of the letters and things like that, which aren't necessarily known to every Israeli. So unfortunately, we have to cross an Israeli off the list unless they have a specific background in magic, which I must say there are quite a number of excellent Israeli authors on all things occult, especially having to do with Hebrew and Jewish folk magic. Unfortunately, those guys don't teach classes on Hebrew, so it leaves an opportunity for me. Next, you have a rabbi. Most rabbis will not teach Hebrew to someone who is not interested in converting to Judaism, is not interested in practicing Judaism. They're pretty religiously devoted. And so saying, hey, Rabbi, I want to learn Hebrew so I can make the keys of Solomon, you would probably not find them very receptive. Some rabbis may be open-minded ones, hopefully, but most rabbis, I think you'd have a challenge tracking those people down. So I have to say, well, that resource isn't there. And then finally, you have a non-native Hebrew speaker. I've encountered this in Christian communities, all sorts of communities. People maybe taught themselves Hebrew off the internet, certainly in occult communities. I spent a little time in Builders of the Adetum, Boda, and I went to some Boda convocations. People who kind of taught themselves Hebrew. Often these people have a very good sort of book knowledge of Hebrew, but the difference between book knowledge and sort of embodied experience, practice knowledge with language is pretty vast, right? Because spoken language is preliminary to written language. So if you haven't heard it spoken, chanted, recited, it can be very hard to know how something sounds just from reading it. And this, especially when it has sounds that we don't have in English. Ko, we have k. Hebrew has k also, but ko in the back of the throat is a different sound. Ha in the back of the throat. We have ha, and Hebrew has ha like an H, but also Hebrew has het, which is in the back of the throat. It's a guttural. We don't have those letters in English. So it can be challenging if you're not used to hearing it and able to practice with someone who's used to making the sounds. It can be very challenging to get it right. And so this comes around to the final thing, which is we're doing sort of important stuff, right? We're doing magic here. Maybe it's just me speaking as a double Virgo, but precision is very important in my work. And I think precision is very important in virtually all good work. Every grimoire that tells you to, draw whatever pentacle or circle on the ground is pretty explicit that you shouldn't just wing it and do it however you want, right? Like they say, take great care in how you form it. And so in the spirit of taking great care, I wanted to offer this course. So a little about me. Many of you know me fairly well who will be watching this. We have definitely some first-time students here. So I'm happy to share a little bit about my pertinent background here. I've been reading and writing Hebrew since 1986 when I was 5 years old. I was raised in a Jewish household. My mother's side is Ashkenazi Jewish. My father's side is Iranian Persian Jewish. So two different traditions that kind of helped me to see a broader, more pan-Judaic view of things, to learn some of these different scripts and to learn some of these different nuances of pronunciation and things like that, because usually within the sort of homogenous Jewish communities, they don't really look outside the box, right? They deal with what's in front of them. Subsequently, I can't speak Yiddish, right, as I might if I was in a purely European Jewish background, or Jiddi, or one of the Persian Jewish languages, or even Ladino. which is like Spanish Jewish. I can't speak those as if I was in a homogenous community, but I have an interesting sort of pan-Judaic perspective that I can. So since I was a kid, I went to Jewish schooling, not quite a yeshiva, which is sort of prepping you to be a rabbi, but what was called the Day School Jewish Learning Academy. The significant difference is that they didn't 100% enforce all the religious rules. They sort of 75% enforced the most important religious rules in the school. But it certainly was a preparatory course of study to be a rabbi. I broadened my interests considerably, and maybe I'll revisit it in the future. In the meantime, I practiced Hebrew every day. I practiced Torah every day. I practiced writing Hebrew every day. I was steeped in all these as part of my daily schooling, the same way I was in English, actually, so to the same degree. In terms of sort of formal Hebrew, I've been practicing Hebrew calligraphy since 2017. Ktav Stam, the writing of Sifrei Torah, Mezuzah, and Tefillin. I do not offer, those such things. Mine are not. I'm not certified to offer those kinds of things, but it is the scribal writing as practiced since ancient times, and educating myself on the Aleph Bet deeper and deeper and deeper has been a necessary part of that. In the course of that, I have been revising Hebrew in ceremonial magic and grimoire texts since 2019. I am consulted by a number of both sorcerers, authors, practitioners, whatever, and academics regarding Hebrew. We find in these things often as we get familiar more with Hebrew, you'll look at a text, and what used to just kind of be like gibberish or some strange exotic word jumps out as obviously Hebrew. You may not know what it means, but as you become more familiar with the language, its structure, and its sound, things will jump out to you as Hebrew. And likewise, to give a quick parallel story, as you familiarize yourself with the occult parts of this and esoteric parts of this, other things will jump out. Again, a quick aside story. Some folks watching this may be active on Reddit, where I have been active in the art occult community for a couple months now, kind of getting my feet wet in there. And someone had posted a section of Shorshei HaShemot, kind of an obscure, but not obscure, but not commonly known outside Jewish communities, a very powerful Kabbalistic text giving the roots of the holy names, and not really translated into English. And someone posted a page asking for translation. So we had people in those other categories, right? We had your Israelis and your non-native speakers looking at it and saying, "Oh no, this is nonsense. This isn't Hebrew." What you had actually was two interesting things in parallel, and then you had people just try to run it through Google Translate, and that didn't work at all either, because what we were looking at, of course, was a verse of scripture that was encrypted with a Kabbalistic cipher to create holy names. So if you don't know, first of all, what a Kabbalistic cipher is, let alone how to crack one, you're just looking at jumbled up letters. If you know, then it was very easy for me to work it backwards and say, look, it's this verse. It's Ezekiel for chapter 1, verse 1. This is what the verse is. And this script underneath is Spanish medieval Jewish script. That's why nobody can read it. It's not nonsense. Start cracking on it that way, right? So as we get more familiar with these things, we're going to see things out in our world, in the magical world, in looking through old occult texts, and things will jump out, and things will make more and more sense. And what is a general mystery can often become crystal clear, and suddenly you have context, you have insight, you have all these things. And so that's where I've been kind of working with people for now 3 years. In my own practice, I've always used Hebrew. I've always prayed in Hebrew. So even my conjure practice, I pray in Hebrew. I prefer to write in Hebrew if I'm doing ritual work, spiritual work, anything of that sort, because it's easier with what we're going to learn today, actually, for me to focus intention in the creating of the letters and the crafting of the words with Hebrew than it is in English. We'll talk a little bit about that today, but that's more for the form of the letter, which we'll discuss in a couple lessons. Excuse me. So speaking of which, let's go over the course schedule real quick. We'll knock out these preliminaries. I'm starting to get excited to teach you guys some Hebrew. Okay, 6:13 through 6:25, beginning today. It's going to run through July 25th with some modifications. We will meet again every Monday and Wednesday at this time with 2 modifications. Firstly, you'll note, so we're today, and then second class is going to be this Wednesday, and then next week, same times. The first 3 classes, we're really going to get familiar with the letters. So by the end of sort of this time next week, you should be very familiar with at least Aleph Bet. You should at least be able to say, I recognize that. You should at least be able to look at some text and say, I see that's Hebrew. I don't know what all these other languages are, but if I show you Hebrew, cuneiform, Arabic, and hieroglyphics, by the end of next week, you'll definitely be able to say which one is Hebrew. So if you recognize Hebrew in an amulet, like actual Hebrew letters, you'll be able to recognize it. I think you'll also, by the end of next week, hopefully get to the point, if you practice enough, where you know the names of the letters and what they represent, what they symbolize, and how to draw them. If you can get that far, we're going to be off and running, and you're going to be able to use the coming weeks to really perfect both your skill at creating the letters and at applying it, magically speaking. So just running through the schedule real quick. Like I said, it's today, Wednesday, then next Monday, Wednesday, the following Monday, that next Wednesday, June 29th, when we do the first pentacle of Saturn. We're going to change the time. I'm going to get back to you guys with the time on that one. We're going to do it on the hour of Saturn, because the first one. So that one. And then July 4th, we're off lighting fireworks, eating hot dogs, doing whatever we do. Then 2 days later, July 6th, we're back. And we'll go through the rest of the pentacles of Saturn all the way through July 25th. I want to give a note on the pentacles, why they are not valid, the pentacles we create in this class, before we go further. I mentioned that in some of the literature promoting the course. The pentacles of Saturn that we create are not going to be valid because we're not creating them on Saturday. We're not creating them on the eve of Saturn. And I will say, for folks who are observant of the Jewish Sabbath and therefore do not work on Saturday, creating the pentacles of Saturn is tricky. If that applies to anyone who's in this course, let me know. I'll tell you how we do it. We basically use the evening hours. There's day hours and evening hours for each planet. Most people don't know about the evening hours, but we can use the evening hours. But don't create pentacles on the Sabbath if it's your practice not to work on the Sabbath. So I will not encourage. I'm not encouraging anyone to break the Sabbath, anything of that sort. Contact me. We'll work. I'll tell you how to do it. It's very easy. You just use this other reference for your time. So with that said, the pentacles, just drawing them doesn't do anything. They have to be created with intention. The time is part of the intention. The ritual is part of the intention. The letters are part of the intention. So we'll cover the letters parts in this class. You can handle the rest of it on yourself. I'm happy to give pointers and consult with you guys on the timing and all these things, because really we're going to want to look at the astrological election of the planet and all this. And maybe in further classes, we can look at some of that stuff. You guys kind of let me know, and that'll help me steer. So that's the schedule we're working with here. Make a note of it. I will be sharing this presentation with everyone. I've posted this all over the place, but in case you need it, here it is. Okay, a little bit about the Hebrew language. Most people, I think, when they hear about the Hebrew language, they know that the Old Testament's written in it, and maybe they know it's, what is the language of Jewish prayer. I don't know. What do you guys know about Hebrew? Students or workshop attendees.
I know it's used in, like you mentioned earlier, like a lot of, I guess, like spells, and you find them you find it in grimoires, like old English, Latin grimoires, and yeah.
Word. So this is true, right? Like it's an old language, right? We're going to talk a little bit about the significance of it as a really old language, and both actually as humans and magically. So first of all, why is it called Hebrew? What the hell does Hebrew mean? What is it called in Hebrew? In Hebrew, it's not called Hebrew. It's called Ivrit. We can see that it actually has the same, right? It's the E is the I, and the B is the V, and the R is the R. And then we throw a W on the end. because we're funny and we speak English, but Ivrit is Hebrew in Hebrew. So what does Ivrit mean? You know, before English words all meant something. Ivrit means it's of Eber, of Ever. Ever is listed in the Old Testament as the grandson of Noah, the guy who brought all the animals on the ark for the flood. So a little bit of occult history here. This is all distilled from, well, you can find most of it in the book of Jasher, which is a rabbinic adaptation of the books of Genesis and Exodus with the rabbinic lore and the legend and the esoterica woven into it, mixed into it, so you don't have to check other sources. But all of it's in various parts of the Talmud and things like that where this esoterica all lives. So a little bit about this line. So first of all, the significance of Noah, this guy with the ark. And side note, I want to address it early in the course. I'm not pitching any particular theology, practice, whatever. You could be Buddhist, you could be a Jain, you could be a Christian, you could be Jewish, you could be Luciferian, you could be whatever you are. You're welcome in this class. But I'm going to present Hebrew in its context. So if there are questions about the cultural context, please bring them forward, because everyone is certainly welcome. And that's necessarily going to probably leave room for some questions. I'm going to try to be as comprehensive as possible. So when I say that, you know, give this history of Noah as a fact, I'm not necessarily stating it as a theological fact for you. It's for you to determine. But I am going to state it as a fact for Hebrew, right? Is the foundation that the Hebrew language assumes to be factual. Okay. So we have this idea that this wise progenitor Noah brought all these animals on the ark to survive a flood that God sent to destroy the world. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. We know from elsewhere that Shem is not the eldest son of Noah, though he's listed first because he's the greatest in prominence, because he is the beginning of a lineage that eventually leads to Abraham, the father of the Jewish and Islamic, and I guess ultimately Christian faiths. And they call him the founder of monotheism, but we'll find in the esoterica, Abraham's role is far more significant as a theurge, right? As someone who performs these miracles in conjunction with God. And it is through the usage and application of the holy names and the Hebrew language that he does this. So this lineage then, this distinguished line of Noah goes through Shem. And Shem has a son named Eber. And Eber is the one from whom we get Ivrit, Hebrew. So it's said that at the division of the earth among the 3 sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, that Shem got 26 countries, 33 islands, 26 out of 72 languages, and 6 out of 16 scripts at the time. So he took one more script than everyone else. He got the Hebrew script. His brothers each got 5, and he got 6. And the other 5 in this script language family are Egyptian, what they call Libyan. And Libyan is what at the time that this is translated, was what they called the Berber people of Northwest Africa. Assyrian, which is Mesopotamia and what is modern day Iraq. Chaldean, which we'll look at in a moment. And hopefully if there's Reddit folks watching this, their ears just perked up, because I know Chaldean astrology and Chaldean magic has been a hot topic of discussion. And Guzaki, we don't really know what this is. Gutazaki, Guzarati, we're not really sure what that language is. It may have died out. Put a pin in some of these languages. We're going to revisit them. I'm going to give you a little more history, though, of Shem and Eber, because Shem and Eber, it's stated in the legend, had this academy. The academy, the tents of Shem and Eber, are where Jacob went, are where Isaac went after Abraham took him to be sacrificed. It's where all the biblical figures went to learn magic. And then Shem and Eber appear over and over and over again in the legend and the lore. They appear before Abraham's grave. They appear, it's said that some folks may be familiar with Melchizedek. Some folks think Melchizedek maybe is or Melchizedek in Hebrew. Some people, certainly Masons, will be familiar with that name. He's the King of Salem. This is a title. He's the priest, king, and prince. No, excuse me. Anyone? Any student? Melchizedek is priest, king, and prophet. Prophet, priest, and king. There we go. Prophet, priest, and king. I said king and prince. Excuse me. Prophet, priest, and king. Melchizedek, is sometimes thought to maybe be the same figure as Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice greatest, because he has this kind of triple office. In any case, it's said that Melchizedek was Shem. They were the same person in the rabbinic lore. Whether that's true or not, it's certainly Melchizedek, this magical figure that performs miracles, kind of appears out of nowhere, seems to be associated in the lore with this character of Shem, the father of Eber, the one who received Hebrew and these other languages. So why is this significant for magic? Well, let's put a pin in that for a moment. Hopefully I've shown you a little bit. I just want to talk about the significance of these language families, because what we have here are the oldest written scripts, the significance of the Old Testament as a piece of history that was copied from an original over and over and over and over and over again, with potential changes and modifications and omissions and all this stuff, but nonetheless, something that was written down for 3,000 years is very, very, very significant. We need to take a moment to appreciate the significance of the written language. Then we can appreciate its application in magic. So we talk first about Count Korzybski, who referred to language as having a time-binding ability, right? What does this mean? This means that if I discover something, if I learn something, if I accomplish something as a human being, before language, before I had words, I could not share it with anyone. I could not share it, so we could not progress as a species. At some point, though, I learned words. I grew up and I had language. I could speak. So now I could express some things, but there are limitations. First of all, I can only express something with spoken language as far as you can hear it. As far as another being that can understand it, can hear it. So it's got a limited scope of distance. And also, it's only for as long as you can hear, right? If I said how to hunt a buffalo yesterday, and you showed up today, tough luck. You don't know how to hunt a buffalo still, right? And so this causes a lot of basic inefficiency, but the idea that there's no, what we call abstraction in computing, there's no ability to take something almost for granted and build on it, right? Because first, I have to know to eat a buffalo. Once I know a buffalo is good to eat, then maybe I'll figure out to hunt a buffalo. And then once I've figured out the idea of killing a buffalo, then maybe I'll go better at killing a buffalo, right? Maybe I'll have a spear. Maybe I'll have a bow and arrow. Once I have a spear, it's pretty easy to go to a bow and arrow. But if I have to start all the way from the beginning every time because no one can tell me this is buffalo, we eat buffalo, we have to kill it to eat it. The best way to kill it is to put something sharp into it until the blood comes out and it stops running. Once I have that as a big, and we have these, how we do that is we have these long sticks and we put the sharp thing on the end. Once I do that, and I'm playing with the fire bow that they've told me about that we use for making fire, at some point, maybe I'll play around and I put the stick in one and the other and I pull it and it works. And I see, now I don't have to run after the buffalo and throw this big thing. I can shoot it with much more accuracy with my bow. And now I can tell everyone, hey, those bows we have, they're great. So as soon as we have spoken language, we can now have this collective problem-solving approach to survival, to our evolution as a species, and on and on and on. But then we get to the written language. And what is the significance of Noah's sons getting the written languages? What is the significance of the written language? This now allows the same principle to be applied asynchronously and alocally, globally. What does that mean? It means across all time and space. Right, we could still find a cuneiform tablet from 3,500 years ago and read a magic spell off it, and boom, we have some cultural interpretation, we have some things to deal with. But the fact is, someone from Mesopotamia 3,500 years ago can speak to me now in Colorado, United States. That is the power of the written language. They did not exist before these languages. This is the difference between the most ancient ancestors, right? When we talk about the unnamed ancestors, or what they're sometimes called, but these ancestors that existed before language, before written language, who are only learning a direct, linear, verbal, one-to-one communication that cannot communicate across time. Now, that doesn't mean that lore cannot accumulate. Usually that would happen through song. It would happen through art, what people call art, symbol writing and things like that. Lore accumulates, culture accumulates, but there is a basic cap on the amount of information that can be handled in that way by a person. We don't get a lot of room for the imaginal and the magical in that, because we're very concerned with, okay, this is the buffalo, this is how you make a spear. There's no reference guide. If you, for example, as we learn things today, we're just going to brush past some things and you're going to check back because it's written down and you can reference it back. You don't have that ability to say that, right? I have almost, I think, 500 books in the Temple Library. If these were 500 conversations that I had sometime long ago, they would be far less valuable to me. But now I know, oh, this factoid, that's in this book over here. I'm not sure exactly which part. It's somewhere towards the end, but I can pull that book. So I don't have to remember everything. I can outsource that to the books, right? I can outsource memory to writing. And then we as a species can outsource memory to writing. And this is a very powerful thing. This is a very powerful thing for magic, both in recording our experiences and in recording the experiments and the operations and recording the records of it, in communicating one way and the other with the spirits, but most importantly, in passing on a record of what has worked, passing on a record of what has worked to future generations. This is very based in writing. And therefore, because this is such an old writing system, all the magic we have comes through it. So that ability to accumulate experience means that we can stand on the shoulders of giants. We're not creating things anew every time. And that's incredibly powerful. We take it for granted every day when we just write things down. The next thing to know is that language, even spoken language, models and constructs realities. Language becomes the operating system of the mind. As a child reaches the age where they acquire language, they start becoming what we call enculturated, right? They start becoming programmed with their culture. This is an interesting phenomenon because it's both completely like unintentional, it's not something we plan, and it's so deep and widespread in that when we acquire language, we get our idea of how time works. That's a crazy thing about how individuation works. And this all happens just from the words we have. In English, for example, we don't have a perfect future tense. We just use the word will. I will go to the store. I will run an errand. I will attend Hebrew class. I will practice my Aleph Bet, right? I will. And to will means to strongly intend, right? I strongly intend, but we're not actually projecting that action into the future as we do with the past, right? We can say, I went to the store. We don't say, I did gone to the store, or we may, but in standard English, we don't say that. We say, I went to the store. I ran an errand. I attended Hebrew class. I practiced my Aleph Bet, right? We have a perfect constructed verb for that. So we have a much better understanding of the past and the future as English speakers. That's not the case for every language. It's certainly not the case for Hebrew, where Hebrew has a perfect future tense. Hebrew is also a gendered language, as is Spanish and Italian and things like that. And so concepts such as calling inanimate objects he or she, meaning whether they represent an embodiment of masculine or feminine principle, right? Is highly significant spiritually and magically. We don't have it in English, right? Objects are objects. They don't have gender to us. But in Hebrew, as a rule, anything that receives, anything that's open is she. Anything that projects, anything that pierces is he. And then you get into like a car. Well, people go into a car, so car is she. We have the same in English with boats, and really only with boats. So having that programmed into the language then not only reinforces an innate understanding of it, but then projects outward It's built into our filter through which we see reality. So language is very rich, very important. Finally, we have to touch on the cost of history, the cost of knowledge, because all cost in human life is fundamentally built on time. Time is money is a phrase we say in English now that we do cost in money. But time is what we have a limited amount of. Everything costs time, even before money, right? Like as a nomadic society, watering the camels costs time. We can't simultaneously water the camels and set up the tent and sit there and smoke hash. We have a time cost to it. So there's a cost to every action. And because of that, we have to consider the cost of history, the cost of magic, because there is a cost to writing. We have less of a cost to writing when we write with a keyboard, typing, because we can move our fingers faster than we can move our whole hand. And when we go back into history and we don't have markers, but we have an ink, quill or a reed that we have to dip in ink every letter or 2 letters, and then we consider the cost of making that ink, because you can't just buy it, and the cost of making the parchment or the papyrus that we're writing on, we start to understand the enormous cost of preserving an idea across time. We take it for granted now because it's easy. You just posted this video. I don't have to write a single thing. I sit here and I talk. Now I can record it, preserve it across time, across space. I'll give it out across the world. And hopefully for generations to come, people will be able to learn Hebrew from this video. We take it for granted now. But in the time when these old traditions existed, you didn't take it for granted. It was very costly to produce a piece of writing. And so those pieces of writing that have been preserved for so long are incredibly precious, right? That what was already a great high cost is now compounded for 3,000 years. So understanding that cost and realizing, taking a moment to take it in, perhaps, is what I'm trying to encourage here. So a magical language family is what we were talking about before. If we run it back and we talk about Eber and the languages that Eber received from his father Shem, right? Egyptian, Libyan, Assyrian, Chaldean. Let's talk a little bit about some of the roots of these ancient magics, how they come into modern magic, just connecting some dots, and then we'll move on a little bit. Egyptian magic probably needs no introduction. The Western occult canon is rife with it. Most of us, I think, are familiar with the Egyptian funerary rites. I think most of us are familiar with the idea of sex magic coming from Egypt and through the funerary rites, the resurrection of Osiris, things of this nature. I think we've all kind of been attended to by the 20th, 21st century Western perception of ancient Egypt as a purely magical place, a place that believed in reincarnation, the hieroglyphics as a magical script and things of that nature. I don't think Egyptian magic needs much of an introduction in terms of its existence, right? People know it, maybe they don't know how to perform it or the subtleties of it, but the acknowledgement of it is certainly there. Now, Libyan magic, again, what they call Libyan, is the Berber people, the people of Northwest Africa. The Berber people have a significant ancestral, even in ancient times, a significant necromantic and ancestor cult. Much work was done and oaths were sworn on the dead in the graveyards. The dead were invoked. And it was generally seen that the successful people in the society by observers worked with the dead. The Berber people are also where we get the idea of blue, that blue color, what we call hate blue in Hoodoo, protecting us from spirits and the evil eye and things of that nature, comes from the Berber people, these people of Northwest Africa. You still see a lot of this magical tradition in the Arab world. The Arab world tends to have blends of all these, to be honest. You still see a lot of this magical tradition, certainly in Morocco and North Africa, absolutely. That kind of not Muslim magic, but Arab world magic, right? And so that certainly comes over and comes to influence Western magic during the Moorish conquest of Spain, right? The Moors very much have their cultural roots in this culture, and therefore comes to influence a much Western thought, a much Western magical thought. We come now into Chaldean magic. It was mentioned that Eber received Chaldean as well. I will link to the book I'll provide in the resource folder. the book by Lenormand. The Chaldean Magic is rather famously the roots of all the magic that we do, the roots of all the magic that we think of as ceremonial magic, ritual magic. It's arguable that the ritual significance of Hebrew in magic is actually a remnant of the ritual significance of Chaldean. One could make that strong argument. I've seen it made. I find it very compelling myself. Chaldean magic very much lays out the framework of theurgy, that is God working, and thaumaturgy, that is miracle working, that we see represented through the Abrahamic religions and through many of the folk magical understandings. Chaldean magic comes to inform Persian magic, right? The idea of the Magi, right? The Magi of Zoroaster, that comes from Chaldean magic. Certainly, our idea of astrology comes from Chaldean magic. Probably our idea of the 22-letter alphabet, and therefore the tarot, as we'll get into, probably comes from Chaldean magic. And definitely our idea of the hierarchies of celestial beings, many of the ideas of the four elements, and a lot of these basic magical, metaphysical concepts come from Chaldean magic. Finally, Assyrian magic, Mesopotamian magic. There's a link here. I'm not going to look at it now. I'll share the presentation. You can look through it. But there's a wonderful presentation on Mesopotamian magic that they did at the Met, and there's some beautiful artifacts and records of that. But much of the dealing with demons, binding demons, exorcisms, things of this nature, directly interacting with spirits and things of this nature, all is in this sort of Mesopotamian realm of magic. So we see this whole language family, right? All the languages that are attributed to Shem's son Eber, Egyptian, Libyan, Chaldean, Assyrian, that one language that is lost or dead, and then Hebrew is the other one, right? So this is a whole magical language family. Getting your feet wet in this gives you so much reach, magically speaking, because again, the ideas of these practices have been transmitted in and sort of constructed in these languages. Okay, so now after all that intro, all that lineup, the Aleph Bet. So the Aleph Bet, the Hebrew alphabet, is the original alphabet. Our word alphabet comes from the Greek alpha beta, the first two letters of the Greek alphabet, and they got it in turn from the Hebrew Aleph Bet. So the Aleph Bet, a little info about this original alphabet. First of all, it's the Semitic language family. As we said, Semitic comes from Shem. As Hebrew comes from Eber, Semite comes from Shem. Right? So the father of Eber, the one who ran the academies, all that stuff. So some key points on Hebrew. Now, English goes from left to right. We all know that. Spanish goes left to right. French, Italian, all that left to right. Hebrew and the Semitic languages in general go right to left. This alone can change the way that you look at a lot of magical books, a lot of stuff you see on the internet, a lot of this and that. This is the difference between having that applied background and people who are self-taught in Hebrew. Very often they may put the correct letters, but they're going to sometimes write them left to right. And therefore everything's written backwards, unintentionally. Maybe there's a reason you would want to write something backwards. That's a whole other discussion. But Hebrew is written right to left, as Arabic is, as the Ethiopian languages are, as the other languages, Chaldean and the other languages we discussed. Secondly, it is a 22-letter language. English is 26 letters, but that's because English has the vowels in the language. We'll get to the next note on this in a second. Arabic is I think a 25-letter language. I'll check. If there's no Arabic speakers here, we have a chart coming up in a moment that will show us. Chaldean is a 22-letter language. Most of these language families, of these magical languages, of these cultures that brought us magic, have 22 letters. So it's good. It's good framework. Tarot folks out there, that 22 is probably ringing a bell. And yes, there's an incredible correspondence to major arcana of tarot. Now, someone out there is saying, but no, there's 21. Major arcana goes to 21. I urge you to remember the Fool, number 0, right? So there are 22 in the major arcana. You can spend all kinds of time figuring out correspondences. That is not what I'm trying to do here. That's another class for another time, another workshop or group or something for another time. But to just know the idea that you can encapsulate all of reality in 22 symbols. That's the idea we find in the major arcana. That's the idea we find in the Chaldean alphabet. That's the idea we find in the Aleph Bet. And again, the vowels do not appear within the text. And we'll look at some Hebrew as we in the future sessions, but just know for now, vowels don't appear in ancient Hebrew. When you're learning, like Jewish prayer books now have the vowels, have vowel representations. Usually if you learn Hebrew, you will learn it with the vowels. It's not how it was traditionally written, right? In the earliest forms, their vowels would not be written. This is again a product, remember if we go back here, product of that cost of recording history. Ink was so precious. Ink was so precious. To make ink back then, you had to find a certain tree that had a gall on it. A wasp has to sting a tree. It has to grow on it. You got to pull that off. You got to boil it. This is before you're even making the ink. Then you got to burn it. Then you got to scrape it. It's so much effort. Then you got to go get a quill or a reed. Then you got to cut it. Then there's so much effort for every letter you have to write that if you can be efficient and omit the vowels, then you can leave them out. And even in English, we can usually read without the vowels. There was a Facebook post that went around some time ago. I will demonstrate it here in the chat though, right? We could probably, if I leave out the vowels and just put the spaces in, you can see, you can read this. I'm sure you can. I'll even type without the vowels and ask a question. There. So take a look in the chat for those of you who are watching this live. If you're on recording, go ahead and just type some English sentences out and remove the vowels. You'll find you can very easily still read it. So continue with the slideshow. So when we have this efficiency necessary, so we're going to not write the vowels. And now we can look at the evolution of the Aleph Bet, of the 22-letter language, from pictograms and ideograms. And today we'll look at some of the pictographic, ideographic representation, and we'll start to build words. Okay, so this is a timetable. It is arranged in Western thought. So it actually goes left to right across time and then top to bottom across the alphabet. So at this point, I'm going to invite those of you in the audience to unmute your microphones. Unmute your microphones because we're going to start to do a little class participation. Can you guys see this graphic pretty okay, or is it not visible for you?
Yeah, I see.
Okay, cool. So we're going to be looking at this column here, the far left. Okay, we got here the earliest form of the language is pretty much hieroglyphics, right? Can you guess what this is? This first one here.
As far as like a word.
Yeah, what's it a picture of?
Oh, so is that a elk or a deer or something?
Yeah, it's an ox. It's damn close. It's an ox. Yeah, but no, that's great. That's great. You probably can't see too well. It's an ox. And so we have the prominent features. We have the horns, and we have the nose sticking out. And so I want to show you now. This column here is Hebrew, and you can kind of watch how it went from the hieroglyphic to Hebrew.
Right.
And you can see how it went from like, okay, there's a picture of an ox, sure, and this is actually how they wrote it, right? So how they drew it, because they didn't have, vector graphics. That's how they drew it. And then it got more simple. It's got the horns and the shape of the head, right? This is when you look up Proto-Sinaitic, that's usually the symbol you see. By the way, what does this look like? This letter here. If you rotate it. It's an A. It's an A, yeah. Yeah, our alphabet comes from this alphabet. Our alphabet comes from this alphabet. It's just mixed around, right? So then it comes through Samaritan, and then eventually it gets to Hebrew. So Hebrew, now it becomes like this. Aleph. So you can kind of see how, all right, it kind of looks like that. I see if you're turning it around, mixing it up, writing it fast, it starts to loosen up. But remember, the thing that I want to get across to you now is ox. Because in the Hebrew language, the word aleph means ox. It's pretty handy. So it's said that Hebrew is like, and Chaldean and this language family is like the chemical language, the language used in chemistry, right? In chemistry, if I write H2O, we know that's water, but actually the characters I'm using, the symbols I'm using are representing what it is. It's these two hydrogen molecules on this big water oxygen molecule, right? H2 is these two. Oh, so in Hebrew, it said that the letter represents the form. The actual letters you're writing with represent the essence of a thing, the spiritual essence of a thing. We're going to look into this a little more. Okay, so we have our first letter here, Aleph, and then we move to our, and that means ox, right? Aleph, ox. Aleph also means hero. Aleph also, and so it's a hero standing up like this. Aleph also means 1,000. It means a lot of things, depending on how we make the vowels. And there's a reason they're all connected. But to keep it simple, Aleph is ox. Let me clear up a little here. I'll actually clear it all so we can keep marking it. Now this next one, this one's hard to guess. You don't know. This one is the floor plan of a house. It's the plan of a house. So bet. Here in classical Hebrew looks like this. And you can see that, how it's like the floor plan of the house, and here's the yard, right? So we have Aleph, right to left. Aleph, the ox, and Bet, the house. Next, we have Gimbal. And this one, I'll be honest, it doesn't in modern Hebrew, really in any of these, look like what it is. But if you know in Hebrew that Gamal is a camel, then you can see it's a camel, there's his head, and there's his legs, right? Gamal, camel. Okay, we're getting somewhere now. Now, next we have Dalet. You need to know in Hebrew, again, here. Hebrew Dalet, throw the vowels out, so we just have the consonants. Dalet, Dalet, door. You see how this is a door, right? It's a door frame. Loop, loop, the door. And actually, like this, has a little tail coming off the top. We'll go into that later. But you could think of it as a doorpost balanced on here. And if you have a notebook, if you have pencil and paper, you can feel free to try to make these crude characters here. We're going to learn them much more clearly, much better. But for now, if you want to. So the next letter is hey. This. You can see originally it was a guy doing this, kind of excited, jubilation, and they represented it as this. Okay. And then they turned it, and it evolves and evolves. It becomes this. Hey means a window. It's a window. Think something could flow right in there, right? So to go over it, we have ox, house, camel, door, window. You're really starting to see how the language represents the worldview, right? What matters in your life? These are the things that matter in your life, right? You're nomadic people living in the desert. What matters in your life? An ox, a cow, a camel, right? A house, a door, your window. These are the things that matter. And window is the same as jubilation, right? Because your heart's open. Ah, that opening up feeling. Wonderful. Okay, next we have Vav. This guy. Represented like this. Vav. So Aleph, the ox, Bet, bite, the house, Gimel, Gamal, the camel, Dalet, Delet, the door, Hey, the window, Vav is the hook or a spike that you use to drive down a tent, right? So, loop, you got a loop, right? There's a tent. And what do you use? You're going to drive a spike in there to hold it down. You ever been camping? Anyone? You need your tent stakes. Tent stake. Vav is a hook or spike. Next, Zayin. Zayin. Anyone want to guess what this is?
So like a arrow or something.
It's a plow, actually. So Zion is the same word for sword. It's a weapon or a cutting instrument. Here it's a plow for cutting the earth or harvesting grain or something. But there you go. You hold these two ends and there's the sharp part. Next is chet. Chet is a combination of a few different letters from the pre-Hebrew languages, but it means so the symbol is the old symbol for courtyard, but the name chet means string. But it corresponds in both cases to the border, the outside, right? You can think of a border laid around something with a string, surveyor string or something like that. It means courtyard. Thread, whatever. Next is tet. You kind of see what it is here. It really loses its form here. This, you can't really see what it is. Tet is a wheel. A wheel. Doesn't look like a wheel anymore in modern. Tet. But this, can you guess what it is?
Mm,
And this one?
like a foot.
It's an arm, right? It's a hand.
Oh,
Hand,
hand.
yeah, yad. So yad is yud. Yud, yad. This one, it's also a hand, but it's the palm specifically. Kaf. It's open. You can see the open palm, right? This one, kind of see it here. What does it look like? This shape. Looks like a shepherd's staff, right? Like a shepherd's stick, yeah. So this is called lamed. And lamed is what's called a goad. A goad. It's this stick that you use for driving cattle. It's like a whip or a stick like this. This one's for sheep, but it's the same thing. So lamed. This, you want to guess what it is? If you know hieroglyphics, you know that this one is. You know Egyptian hieroglyphics. It's the same.
No.
No? What does it look like?
Water or something?
Yeah, you nailed it. Absolutely. Water. Water in Hebrew is mayim. The letter is mem. What about this guy? What's that look like? It's totally obvious.
Oh, is this?
Yeah, snake.
Okay.
Snake. We say actually in Hebrew fish. Probably it was nachash, this letter. Now it's called nun. Nun means fish. Probably the letter was originally nachash, which means snake, but call it a fish. Call it fish. I'm going to blow your mind in a minute when we finish this. Next, we have this one. This one's hard to tell what it is. It's a column, a supporting column. Looks like, once you know it, you see it, right? That's a column.
Yeah.
Column in Hebrew is samach. Now we form it like this. This one? Any thoughts?
Eye.
Yeah, damn right, it's an eye. Yes, it's ayin. Even the word ayin, the name of the letter, has ayin. Sorry.
That's number 17.
Oh, dang, I'm not even counting them. Yeah, no, 16. 16. This one's hard to tell what it is. It's a little hard to tell what it is. It's a mouth.
Is that a boat? Oh.
It's a mouth. Okay. Okay, that's how you say mouth in Hebrew. So to go run you through it, I'm going to point over here. Spotlight. We have ox, house, camel, door, window, spike or a hook, a sword, string or a courtyard, a wheel, a hand, an open hand or a palm, a cattle driving stick, water, fish or a snake, a pillar or central support of a tent, an eye, and a mouth. Again, hopefully we can start to see, again, how the language is a reflection of a reality. We have a nomadic tribe in the desert. What are the things they're worried about? They're worried about their cattle. Where am I going to sleep? Where are you going to sleep? Where's the boundaries? How are we going to keep the peace between us? How am I going to hold my tent up? How am I going to receive something? How am I going to give something? How am I going to receive something? What am I going to eat? Where does that live? You're starting to see how this is representing is a very model of the reality of the lifestyle, the very basic needs. And so once upon a time, this is what the language was. I'm trying to communicate either across time. If I want to say this is a place where it's good for the cattle, maybe. So there was the old version of hay, this one, this guy here. I might do that. And the cattle, it's like happy cattle here. Just make those marks on a stone so that when I come across it or someone else who knows these symbols come across it, I might say, oh, this is a good place to graze the cattle. The cattle are happy here, etc. It's not to make a word. It's not representing a sound per se. But we're representing an idea. And that's why Hebrew is powerful in magic to this day, because the symbols themselves represent an idea. The symbols themselves represent ideas, and we still have those ideas. So we'll keep going. So ayin, pay, this one, a little tricky to guess what it is. Once you hear it, you'll see it. Anyone who fishes and know eagle talon hook, it's a fish hook. Fish hook. Okay, you can see that, right?
Yeah.
Fish hook. We need a fish hook, of course, because we need that to get the fish out of the water, right? So this one, there's a debate about it. There's a debate about it. It's formed like this in modern Hebrew. Kof.
Is that the head?
Go ahead.
I thought Kof was the head or the back of the head.
The back of the head is what Western occultists say. Yes. In linguists say that it's maybe a monkey. Those of us who try to unify things say, well, the back of the head's kind of like the monkey part, right? It's not the front conscious part. In actuality, it's the inner part, in the cerebellum. And if you see it as the cerebellum, the brain stem, the inner part, okay, it's the back of the head, the monkey part, this lower nature part. Kof. The next letter here, well, in the picture, it's really clear, right? It's the head. Resh, Rosh is head in Hebrew. So you can see how it gets stylized to this, right? Resh. The next one, this one you can't see it too good. It used to be drawn like this. This is how I like to draw it. What do you think that is?
W.
What's up? No, well,
That's
sure,
a W,
as a
right?
letter, it's W, but as a picture. What is that a picture of?
Flames.
Flames is a good guess. Anything else? Fire is certainly something it's associated with. Let me draw it another way. Draw this first. Now I'll draw it here. What if I draw this here?
Oh, teeth.
Teeth. Yes. Yes. And we're going to need the teeth because we have food and we have cattle and we have all these things we need to talk about. Shin. It's an ugly shin, but I'm drawing with a mouse. And finally, we have this, which is just a mark, sign. You think about sign right here, right? If you're not literate in the old days, you would put a cross as your mark. It means a mark. So these are the actual meanings of the letters. So again, running through them: ox, house, camel, door, window, hook, sword, courtyard or string, wheel, hand, palm, teaching stick or ox stick, whip, what have you. You'll notice it's a weaker version of this is a sword, this is a whip. This is stronger. This one is to motivate, this one's to end, right? Water, the fish that lives in the water, the pillar, the eye, the mouth, the fish hook. So the fish hook goes in the mouth. There's the fish, there's the water, right? We go from land animals, transition into the sea animals here. The back of the head, the front of the head, the teeth, and a marking. So this gives us a functional pictographic language. Each of these symbols holds in it a more complete idea, because does teeth have fire in it? You better believe it, right? Because what do? They destroy things, they break things up, they hurt, right? Does ox have the idea of power in it? Of course, an ox plows the whole field, right? So these things have does the mark have the significance of finality? Yes. Does it have the significance of a name? Yes. Right. So all these things have multiple layers of meanings. And now we're starting to see how it works like hieroglyphics. How it works like hieroglyphics, where, of course, the Egyptians had a rich and poetic language using symbols. Yes, they put an eye, the Egyptian hieroglyphic of an eye, right? Is a very common one, the Eye of Horus. It means an eye, but it doesn't only mean an eye. It also means vision. It also means insight. It also means to see. It also means to imagine. And when you connect it with some other things, maybe you connect an eye with sleeping, then maybe it's talking about dreaming, right? So we can now connect these symbols to make some phrases, to make some statements. Okay, let's go back to control here. Oh gosh, I gotta pull this stuff. So here we have them all again. I'm going to upload this to that folder, to that link for everyone. But if you want to go through it, screenshot it to have it now, write it down in your notebook, whatever. We're going to go through. Now, this one has the sounds they make underneath. Has the sounds they make. I'm going to beg to differ on some of it, and I'm going to correct that now. This is really teaching you for modern Israeli Hebrew, as we discussed. It's a little bit different than classical Hebrew. So we will go over them now, but now you can see the letter of the name. But I'm going to ask you to now look at the letter of the name and remember what that symbol meant. Remember what that symbol meant. I'm going to give you guys the link to this so you can check back and forth, but you'll have lost all of everything I'd written there. So you're going to have to develop that, but I'll walk you through it once now. We have the ox, right? You see his horns. We have the house, the frame and the foundation. We have the camel, his head, his neck, his legs. We have the dalet, the door frame. We have the window, the door frame, but there's this part so the air can flow in here, right? We have the tent spike, the hook, the vav. We have the sword. Here you can see that, the cross guard and the handle. Imagine the blade coming up from here, zayin. We have chet, which is the courtyard or the string, the thread. You can imagine this is the courtyard around the house. Tent, you're going to have a hard time remembering it. It's a wheel unless you think of it as a 3D drawing of a tire, which hopefully this mnemonic device is ridiculous enough that you'll never not be able to see this when you look at this letter. And it's a tire coming like this, right? And it's zoom, zoom. Here's the car, right? If you driver, boom, and there's the tire. Okay, so hopefully having seen that, you'll remember for the rest of your life, that's a wheel. Okay, a wheel. Yod is a hand. How do you know it's a hand? First, it looks like a finger, you can say. We say it's the finger of God. You can start with that one. It's reaching. It's reaching. It's a hand. So remember that this is a hand. And then, of course, this is an open palm. You know that comes right after the hand, but also you can see it's an open palm. Used to be drawn like this, actually. Which is, by the way, where we get our letter K, and you better believe it makes a K sound. And we'll go through doing the sounds in a moment. That's more for next week. This is a final letter form. I'll mark the final letter forms on here. We will learn those. They are important. They're not a first lesson thing. They're more second or third lesson thing. And this is just the same as the letter that immediately precedes it. It's just written a little different when it's at the end of the word to help indicate word breaks and things of that nature. Again, we had to have a hyper efficient language when we had to make our own ink. Okay, so the hand, here we are, the teaching stick, the whip, right? The ox goad, the shepherd's staff, here it is. There's the shepherd's staff. Remember that one? This one again, oh man, I forgot I had the final letters marked. This one, it's gonna be hard to remember. This one's water. Water, how are you gonna remember that? Because there's a beautiful sunset over the ocean. There's the cloud or a bird or whatever, and it's water. This is the final form of that. This one is your snake, your fish, whatever, however you want to look at it. And this one can sometimes be confused with this one. The difference is on this one, on the hand, it's like a C, right? It goes all the way around. Whereas on the fish, the top is much shorter. This is the pillar. Look how solid it looks. It's a pillar. It can hold up a building. This one's going to be tricky to remember, but these are the eye. Just remember the two eyes right there. Here's the mouth. Here's the nose. You can see the eyes. So it's the eye. This one you can usually remember is the mouth because it has actually a little mouth over it. It's like this guy, but it has this hanging down. It has an upper lip hanging down here. He's got a little tongue here. So that's the mouth. Final form of that. This one's your fish hook. Looks like a fish hook. The word tzadi also in Hebrew is tzaddik is a righteous man. So it's a righteous man bent over in prayer, right? See him bent over here. Here's his head, and here's his hands clasped together. And he's praying. And the righteous man is like the fish hook, right? You can carry that through the New Testament, the fishing parables and things. Okay, the back of the head. How do we know it's the back of the head? The monkey, because remember, it's the brain stem, the cerebellum. There's the face, boom, and our mouth, and there's the back of the head. And here's the head, the front of the head. Remember, if you saw the evolution, this is the hairline. There's the nose, chin, mouth, eye, head. It's the hair, resh. This one, again, looks like fire, hard to remember. It's the teeth. The teeth. Fire in the teeth, same thing. And this one's the mark. Right? We're going to play some games with this stuff and make sure that you are internalizing it all. And if you're watching on recording, you can play along at home, however works for you, or play your own game. But I'm going to go ahead and pronounce the names of the letters. That's what we want to try to get across, because I want to be able to refer to the letters by their names. We'll also talk a little bit about the sounds, but that's not the main purpose of what we're trying to accomplish in this class. So, Aleph, Bet, Gimbal, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, Het, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Ayin, Pe, Tzadi. It's not just an S, it's like a TS or a TZ, as they show right here. Tzadi. Kind of bounce it off the tz. It's like, I don't know if you have kids. If you have kids at home, you might go tz, that kind of sound. Tzadi. To a dog, something. Tz, tzadi. Kof. Kof. It's not kof in the front of the mouth. Kof. Kof. I'm making that connection. Kof in my throat. Resh. Resh. Shin. Tav. Tav is the back of my tongue. Up here we had tet. Tet. My tongue's in the front of my mouth. They both make a T-like sound, but there's a difference between it t and t. Hopefully you can hear it on the mic. T, 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 t. And if I make even the same vowel sound, da and da, da and da. Slightly different. Tet is like Spanish. You speak Spanish, it's in the front of the mouth. So the sounds that the letters make. They say Aleph makes silent. It's not silent. Aleph is unvoiced. It takes the sound of the vowel that's underneath it, but it colors the pronunciation of the vowel. I'll say the difference between Aleph and Ayin, which they say are both silent, and they both color the vowel, is the pronunciation. And again, we'll go into this more in future class. How the shape of the mouth is when the vowel comes out, right? So Aleph is in the front of the mouth. And Ayin is in the throat. And It's two different sources of the sound in the mouth, where that sound wave begins, where that vibration begins in the body, what parts of the body are connected to the vocal anatomy that creates that sound wave, the shape of that sound wave, everything is influenced. And so to say that they're both silent is okay for someone who wants to learn modern Hebrew. It's inadequate for us as magical users. We should learn to pronounce it correctly. It's important to pronounce things correctly.
Excuse me, Moses.
Yes.
Is this similar to like in English vowels where they have like two pronunciations, or is like an A or an ah?
Yeah. Well, you kind of get into that. But so in English, the way we have vowels, like the difference between I and E, I can make both of those sounds, or I, right? they say it's between a long or a short sound. And there's something to that in Hebrew, but Hebrew has some other aspects of pronunciation. The glottal stop is the technical term. And when we get into pronunciation lessons, we'll go more into the technical part of it. But it's just where whether you're bouncing the tongue off the roof of your mouth or the base of your tongue off of the back of your throat to generate the sound wave is the big difference. Great question. All right, so now we're going to go into some practice. Now, no labels. If you're here and you're live, I'm going to ask you to join for this. Who can remember? Let's go with this one. Oh, let me go back. Sorry, I didn't mean to go forward. Let's go back. Can anyone remember what this means? Pictographic.
Shin.
That is shin. That's the name. Yeah. Good. What does it represent? I wasn't even
fire,
teeth. You're damn right. Yes. So yeah, if you know the name, that's bonus. I don't even expect. If you know the names, great. I just wanted you to get the ideographic idea. So shout it out. If you know one or both, great. What about? Let me give a spotlight. Arrow. What about this guy here?
Ooh.
Gimbal, the camel.
There you go. Let's do an easy one now. Let's do this one. Well, this is a handle. This is the cross guard, and the blade comes up from here. That's Zayin, the sword, the weapon. Okay, I'll keep going. You learned this 15 minutes ago, and I assume the first time in your life. You're doing awesome. This is for me to gauge how much more I need to emphasize, right? But remember, it's a sword. There's the handle, and Vav and Zayin look very, very similar. And this is Vav over here, the 10th spike, and this one's Zayin, the sword, because it doesn't have the blade. If it had the blade, you would have no question. What about this one?
Wait, which one?
Oh, sorry, this one.
Door.
The door, yes.
Dalet.
Excellent. All right, how about this one?
Oh, that's a snake, the fish.
Close. This one's the fish over here.
What?
The old version, the ancient version of the fish looked like that or
that?
that. It's hard to say.
Oh man.
So this one here, I'll draw in the hint again, the mnemonic. Don't worry about this top part. How about this?
Oh, that's the rod.
Yes, the rod, the shepherd's, the goad. Yes, excellent. Lamed. Excellent. Good teamwork, guys. I like that. All right, we remember this one?
Ooh, that is at the top, the mark.
No, that's this guy down here.
Oh, I'm thinking X. Okay.
Yep. Well, so this is a horn. I'll draw the old version of it.
Oh, that's the A. Is that the K?
You got it. It's the A. Keep going.
The ox, right?
Yes. There you go. The ox. Yes. Do we remember what this one is? Got the foundation here, the roof up here.
Oh, it's the bet house.
The house bet. Yes. All right. We did pretty good here. Let me check the time. All right, so it's 5:40. Let's move on. We'll go on to my next little game here that I created. So we're going to represent some ideographic ideas. If you're seeing this on recording and you know Hebrew, you're going to see some letters here. You're going to see words here, actually. You're going to see words here. But we're going to just deal with these again as the ideographs. We're not reading Hebrew. We're not trying to sound out these words. I'm going to ask you to say what the symbols mean based on just the game we just did, the same as this game that we just did. We're going to do it again, and now we're just two symbols. Okay? And then we're going to try to put those ideas together like we were saying and try to pull an idea out. So let's start with this one. Can we identify the two letters, or the two symbols here? What are the hieroglyphic characters?
Identify.
Well, it's just like you did before. What is it? What does each of these mean? This one, then this one. Just remember the one on the right first, and then the one on the left.
that was the shepherd's
Yep, the staff.
staff, and then that's the ox.
Okay, so you got two ideas here. Dr. Cosmic, you're going to have fun with this one. So the staff and the ox. Take a guess. What does it mean to staff the ox? When do you remember? And I'll say there's a whip. Think of it as a whip. When do you whip the cattle?
I'm thinking just like plowing or something, or
Well,
driving the ox. Or
so it's consider that this whip is a disciplinary item. So you're not encouraging it with it. You're disciplining it, right? So you're disciplining the ox. This word is pronounced. Does anyone want to guess how this might be pronounced? I'll tell you the vowel.
oh
that you're
wait,
missing here. The vowel is this vowel. It's a dot up here. It makes an O sound. So if you know how this letter is pronounced, remember this is opening the mouth. So lo. This word is pronounced lo. Whipping the ox, it means no in Hebrew. This word lo means no. Whip the ox. Don't do that.
exactly.
Right.
Okay,
So now we're going to start to connect some of these ideographic ideas to the linguistic ideas. Because Hebrew's built on 3-letter roots, but there are a number of 2-letter roots. All right. Now, who remembers these two ideograms? This guy and this guy. And we're going to call this one we said is two different things, but we're going to use the nicer one that we talked about. I'll write it in ancient here.
So the right, is that right one the courtyard, or?
So it looks like the floor plan one, but it's actually
So that's the fish.
the fish, and it's the open hand, the palm.
letting the fish go.
So we have an open hand and a palm. So if we're reading as a sentence, where the palm means to receive. If this is let's say the first one's a verb and the second one's a noun. Let's kind of treat it like that, okay? So the verb for palm is receive. And then the noun is, what are we receiving? Receiving a fish, right? So this word, can we try to pronounce it? Anyone? This letter is kaf. This letter is nun. And I'll tell you it's kaf nun. And I'll tell you the vowel is e. Ken in Hebrew means yes.
Yes.
Give a man a fish. Receive a fish. Yes. And think about receiving the fish that lives in the depth coming into the hand. Right? Yes. Okay. Okay. What about this one?
Ox. Oh, and that's the court.
Yeah, that's what you were thinking this one was.
Okay, that's so that is the courtyard.
Sorry. The courtyard's this. This one has the foundation, the roof.
Foundation, roof. So that's not the house, right?
The house, yes. These are the first 2 letters of the alphabet, actually. It's the house. So ox and house, right? You might say ox house, stable. You might think it's the stable where the ox sleeps, whatever, but the ancient people didn't keep animals inside a building.
Right, so I guess
we'll add the words of the. The ox of the house. What's the ox of the house? What do you think this word might mean?
Like the pet?
The ox. The ox is the one who provides the food. The ox is the one who brings the strength, the power. The ox of the house is the father. This is Av. Father is Av.
Okay.
The ox of the house. Dr. Cosmic, I see you have to run. I got one last one for you before you go. Do we remember these pictograms? The teeth of the door. The teeth of the door.
A lock.
The teeth of the door. The vowel is like this. It's 3 dots. It makes an S sound. Who wants to try to sound it out?
Sir. Sar.
This is Dalet. Dalet.
Oh, that's Dalet.
So it's an S sound. Shed. Shed in Hebrew is a demon.
Yeah, Shadim.
Shadim.
Shadayim.
The teeth of the door. The teeth of the door.
That's interesting.
And final one we have here. This one and this one. The whip of the house, the teaching stick of the house. Lev, the heart.
The teaching stick of the house. That's
So
good.
we start to assemble the simple ideographic ideas that we have here with their meanings into pictographic ideas. And then we add the vowel to it. We have L and and we add the vowel to make lo, and lo means no. But we have that entire concept built into with the ox, no. Right? The idea is there. We just need to connect it to a word. And this is how Hebrew gets built, how it's a unique language, and how the ability to understand the symbolic and pictographic ideas builds into understanding the language at a much deeper, rich level. And so when we use it and we encounter it in seals, sigils, pentacles, and all sorts of things, then we're starting to be able to read pictographically out what these names mean. Read pictographically, understand conceptually how these names connect. Right? When you see, we're gonna close on this thought because we're a bit over on time here. But when we see the name of the Archangel Michael, Mikael, without even talking about the meaning, we have water, we have hand, we have palm, we have ox, and we have the goad. First of all, at the end there, we have the opposite of this. This is the goading the ox. We have oxing the goad in the other one, right? Overpowering that force that whips us, right? We have the reaching hand and the giving hand, both forms, both hands. If we study Kabbalah, we know about the two hands of God, right? The left and the right hand, right? And interestingly, we have it arising out of what? Water. Whole different thing, whole different subject. And over time, sometimes we could talk about the association of Michael with water because, of course, contemporary is associated with fire in every magical tradition. And there's a story behind that too. But we have many more lessons to go. We're going to wrap up on that one. I'm going to thank you guys who attended live. I'm going to thank all you who are reviewing this. I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to share this link with you. I'm going to encourage you to share this recording, share this link with people, share this class with people, invite them to come to these lessons. Okay. If folks want to make donations, if you're watching the recording, you can donate directly through my link tree. So the address for that, I'll put it up on screen here, I guess, if I can. If you want to donate to me, you can donate to me on Linktree. You go right into Linktree. I'm going to share it on screen. If you're watching this recording, if you don't want to donate, and you maybe haven't gotten any value out of this lesson yet, keep studying. If you want to donate in the future, this will always be here. And I encourage you to keep joining us and studying the lessons, whether you're in a position to donate or not. So it's linktr.ee/Hoodoo Moses. I'll go ahead and type it in here as well. Yeah, here we go. So linktr.ee/Hoodoo Moses. And that'll bring you to my link tree. If you follow me on Reddit, you're on there. If you follow me on Instagram, it's the link in my bio. But you can generally find it. So linktr.ee/Hoodoo Moses. This bottom link right here. Donate to Holy Mountain Spiritualist Temple. You can go donate for the class. The suggested donation is $26 a class. Go ahead and do that here. But any amount, any amount. 26 is based on, by the way, as we'll get into Gematria, 26 is the value of the Tetragrammaton in Gematria. So that's where we get 26 from. It's a traditional donation. 18 is a traditional donation because it's the value of life, etc., etc. We'll talk more. We'll talk more about the symbolic and the richness of the Hebrew language and how we connect it to numbers and pictures and ideas and sounds and all these wonderful things. But for now, please review the class, study the class, share the class with people. Again, I encourage you to register directly for the class. And I will put that link in that same link at linktr.ee/Hoodoo Moses. Magical Hebrew series registration. You can click that. And I'm going to walk you through, in case you're just watching this on recording, it's going to take a moment to pop up here, but you can say name your donation amount right here. If you want to pay $10 for the class, just go type $10. Submit. It'll say negotiating your price. It'll lock it in. Just click buy for $10. Wonderful. You're going to have to create an account. You'll go through, you do the whole rest of that. But don't please, I guess the main point I want to say is Please don't feel intimidated by the challenge of the class or the cost of the class. Sign up. We'll learn together. We're here for 6 weeks. This is just the beginning of an awesome journey, and we'll continue from there. I have a Discord. We can all join the Discord and continue the discussions and all this. We'll support all this with the community. That's all going to be at that link, by the way, which I'm going to put back in here. And again, I'm going to ask your about 24 hours of patience, for the DNS to catch up and all the hosting and everything to catch up. But it's going to be HebrewStudents.HoodooMoses.com, HebrewStudents.HoodooMoses.com. I will email it to the registered students. And for the rest of you all, just type it out. It's HebrewStudents.HoodooMoses.com. With that said, we've gone a little bit over time. I appreciate your patience. I appreciate you joining me for a lengthy class. And hopefully we'll see more of you live for Wednesday's class and next week. And I hope to have a kind of thriving class community here where we can all practice together and build our knowledge. Thanks again, everyone. I'll see you on Wednesday.